Imagine a world where women gained the right to vote not in the early 20th century, but centuries ago. What if women had been shaping politics, society, and the world right alongside men, starting, let's say, during the Renaissance or even ancient Greece? How different would our history and our present be? Well, buckle up, because we're diving deep into this fascinating what-if scenario. And trust me, it's going to be a wild ride. Let's start with ancient Greece, the so-called birthplace of democracy. Now, in our timeline, women weren't even close to having voting rights here. They were busy managing households while the men got to decide the future of Athens. But imagine if the women of Athens had a say. Suddenly, the political debates in the agora wouldn't just be about military strategy or trade. You'd hear discussions about family, education, healthcare, even the role of women in society. If we're funding public baths, why can't we fund schools for girls too? It's about time we even the playing field. Boom, early feminism in action. And if women were allowed to vote and influence policy in these early democracies, you could bet that gender equality would have been on the agenda centuries before it even crossed the minds of 19th century suffragettes. Fast forward to the Middle Ages. Now, imagine that in addition to the queens we already know, like Elizabeth I or Catherine the Great, all women had political influence through voting. Medieval politics would look very different, don't you think? Perhaps we should prioritize healthcare for our peasants. Plagues aren't good for anyone's kingdom. That's right. Medieval Europe, with women voting, might have seen healthcare and family issues rise to the top of the royal agenda. Instead of just focusing on who's marrying who for political alliances, maybe they'd also care about public health and education. You know, the stuff that keeps a kingdom running. Plague-free peasants. I suppose that's good for morale. And here's another twist. With women voting and having political influence, maybe we'd have avoided some wars altogether. After all, if half the population had a say and they had a vested interest in not sending their sons, husbands, and brothers to die in battle, maybe diplomacy would have had more of a spotlight. Instead of invading, why don't we just talk it out? Now, I'm not saying women are all peacemakers and men are all warmongers, but with a balanced political landscape, maybe history's endless string of battles could have been shortened. The Renaissance, a period of flourishing art, science, and intellectual debate. In our timeline, women like Isabella d'Este were patrons of the arts, but they didn't exactly have political power. Why should our public funds go to endless wars when we could invest in art, education, and science? Imagine a world where every woman has access to these opportunities. Now that would have been a game changer. With women voting and influencing the direction of society, maybe we would have seen even more female artists, scientists, and thinkers emerging during this time. Who knows? Perhaps we'd be studying the works of Leonardo da Vinci or Michelangelo right alongside the greats. And let's be real, if women had been voting centuries ago, we might have cut through a lot of the nonsense that held back progress. Maybe we wouldn't have had to wait until the 20th century for basic rights, like education for girls and healthcare for everyone. By the time we hit the Industrial Revolution, if women already had the right to vote, we'd likely see a very different landscape. The factory conditions we know, overworked, underpaid, and often brutal, might have looked a lot different with women voting on labor laws. Children should not be working 14-hour days in factories, and neither should their mothers. Let's pass fair labor laws. You can bet that labor reforms, family leave, and better working conditions would have been on the table far earlier. Maybe the Industrial Revolution wouldn't have been such a grind, literally. And hey, maybe we'd all have had the 8-hour workday by 1850 instead of waiting until the 20th century. But here's the big thing. What happens when women's voices start shaping political and social landscapes centuries ahead of schedule? Well, we likely would have seen major advancements in gender equality much earlier. So let's fast forward to today. Imagine this. By the 21st century, gender equality has been the norm for centuries. Women have been in power just as long as men. We've seen female inventors, leaders, and philosophers change the world right alongside their male counterparts. The idea of a first female president or first female CEO would be old news. Heck, we might have had dozens of them by now, and maybe our world would be a lot more balanced, with policies reflecting the needs of everyone. Equal pay? That problem might have been solved long ago. Work-life balance? Maybe we'd have had better parental leave and more family-focused policies in place for centuries. And dads, you might have been changing diapers and taking paternity leave a long time ago. No more babysitting your own kids. You'd have been full-on co-parents centuries before it was trendy.